What a pleasure it is to meet you. Thank you so much for taking some time for us.
Well, I'm very happy to meet you.
One of the things that's rather intriguing to us is where the passion for music comes from. I wonder for you, where did you develop?
I don't know. I guess I was born into it because from my early age I was very lucky that I got into the whole atmosphere with my brother Uday Shankar, who was very famous, as you know. He was the first artist, a dancer, who made a group of dancers and musicians starting from 1930. And we were based in Paris. And at the age of 10, I came direct from Varanasi, where I was born, to Paris. So it was a great change for me, and I was in the world of music all of a sudden, music and dance. And that was when I was equally a dancer as well as a musician, playing different instruments. And my brother had very good musicians in the group. So I was hearing all the time, learning as much as I could. And this is how I spent my 8 years touring, Paris being the center. We came to United States, first time 1932. I remember so clearly 4 times till 1938. And the great impresario Solomon Hurok was our presenter. And my brother was the first superstar from India. And it was a fantastic time, really. Until the war started in 1938, we had to disband the troupe, and my brother started an institution in a hill station called Almora in India. And meantime, while this period, my brother got the greatest musician in the world, I am sure, at that time, Ustad Alauddin Khan. And he joined the troupe as a soloist of playing the sarod. And I was, like his interpreter and like his son. He immediately took me because he left his son Ali Akbar Khan, who was very young at that time, back in India. So I was like his interpreter, taking care of him, and he was 1 year only with us, touring mostly Europe. And he had to go back because he was in service with Maharaja of Maihar, a small native state. But that 1 year was something which changed my life, because he took me as a son and started teaching me the sitar and some songs and classical basic training. And I was amazed to see such a great musician. Why I'm talking about him is because it's very little known about him. You know about us, me, Ali Akbar, and a number of other great musicians from India today, but he was greatest in the sense that he was not just a sarod player, he played almost every instrument equally well, excepting the sitar. Somehow, strangely enough, he didn't play the sitar, but he knew all the technique because he had learned from great sitar players of those days. His main thing was sarod. He was known for that. But he was the only person who could play the sur singar and rabab, which were the classical. This is not the Afghan rabab, mind you. The name is rabab, they gave same name, but it was a much more developed instrument in the period of starting from early 16th century, at the time of Akbar the Great, the emperor. there was this great musician called Tan Sen. I am sure you heard the name. And he sort of was the court musician, principal musician, and through his family, two lines, the daughter's side and his son's side. The daughter's side, they played the bean or veena, the North Indian veena with two big gourds. And the son's side, they played the rabab, which Tansen himself invented. It was not like the Kabuli or the Afghan rabab, but it was a special thing which he invented, and the style of their playing, both the Sur Sringar and rabab, Baba was the best exponent of that. No one knew about this, unfortunately, because he was more known for he played the violin like all his life, and he took the same violin which is common, but he played with his left hand. You know, he was ambidextrous. He could play the sarod with the left hand, tabla with the right hand, write with the right hand, eat with the right hand. He was fantastic. I mean, I wish I could tell so much about him. And he was a composer. Every day he would compose at least 3-4 songs, a lot of instrumental pieces. He was, I mean, unfortunately, even India people don't know much about him.
I remember reading about him. It's a very fascinating story. And I wonder, did he turn you on to the sitar, or had you already been playing?
I was fooling around with the sitar because, you know, I didn't have proper training, but I was very good in picking up things by hearing. So, and there were two wonderful musicians. They really started me without seriously teaching me, you know what I mean. And I was playing the sarod also. I was playing the sitar, the flute, banging the drums, but, you know, not properly trained. Baba put me, I called him Baba, he put me on the groove actually. Started me and started teaching me vocal music as well as, and he says sitar would be best. You should leave all and concentrate on sitar. So within that 1 year he really changed me. And unfortunately he had to come back because he was in the service of Maharaja. So that was the maximum time he could spend. But then, of course, after he came back, for 2 years I was again touring with my brother as a dancer and playing all instruments. But my whole mindset was completely changed. And I was toying between, and my brother was anxious that I should keep his work. He was planning already the institution, and you know. But I made up my mind, and in 38, when we came back, when the war broke out, I straight went to Baba. It's a remote village, native state, Maharaja being there, and started my almost 7 years stay with him. I toured with him also, and it was something fantastic in the old style of Gurukul system. And having been so utterly spoiled, touring all over the best hotels, best life, and you know, my first youth in Europe and America, it was such a different, you know, that simple life, and so much of mosquito, bed bugs, snakes around, and but then it took me a little time and strength of mind, and Baba's love and the great music, and my life changed really. So I took my career, and then of course gradually everything wonderful happened to me.
Did you record with him?
Not with him, unfortunately, no. But I used to tour with him when he had concerts, sitting with him, initially playing the tanpura, the drone instrument, but then also playing the sitar. He would encourage me. But you know, he was such a I'm the only person I have seen who came almost like him in temper, and that personality was Pablo Casal. But he was something else. He had wild tempers. I can proudly say that the only one who never was beaten by him or scolded, Otherwise, he would utter something. And if you didn't pick up first time, all eyes will be, his hair stood up, He has very little hair, of course, but his beard I have never seen, terrific, absolutely. But I am the only person he never, one day he only said, I was performing and there was some very difficult left hand and combination of cutting these strings, cutting means, sound-wise. And I was a bit slow in that, otherwise I could pick up everything immediately. He was very happy always. But that day, because I couldn't pick that up, he said, go wear bangles. That means what he meant, that your hands are like girls, you have no strength. So go wear bangles. That was enough. I had tears and I just went and packed my suitcase and was ready to take the next train to wherever I thought that time. I was really completely, because from my childhood I have never been scolded by anyone and I couldn't take it. Since that day, he never even raised, if he was a bit angrier, he would go out, beat a dog or beat some other student, take out his anger. It was so funny, I tell you. But he was the greatest musician that I can think of. I'm telling all this because really very little known about him.
And he's recently passed. Is that right?
Pardon?
Did he recently pass away?
He passed away in 1973. At the age of, according to our calculation, at the age of 93. But unfortunately, what happened, after he was almost 70, he was so sturdy, so strong, but he grew old very quickly after his 70s, his health, a number of problems, and he would say, every few months he would say, I'm 1 year older, like that. And because, among the Muslim community, I think they follow the moon, so their years are whatever. He would say 5 years more than what he was. And he's next year again another few years. So that way they even had a centenary of him when he was hardly 85 or so, something. But, in truth, he was really 93, maximum 94 or 95 when he died. And Ali Akbar Bhai, I saw him, he was 2 years younger to me. And I saw him from his childhood, and I never thought he would grow out to be such a great musician. He didn't seem at all, because Baba used to beat him up and scold him so much, he was not wanting to practice even, But somehow something happened. First when I saw him before going to Baba, coming with us in 1935, I thought he is going to be, But when I came back and saw him next, when I went to Mayhar to learn in 1938, he was already so wonderful. I couldn't believe it. And of course, the whole world knows now, he was after Baba died, I considered him the greatest sarod player. I'm talking about Ali Akbar Bhai, who unfortunately died recently. So you have some question?
Well, I was, one of the things that I'm sort of intrigued by is the title that George Harrison gave you is the father of world music. Well, how does this sit with you?
Well, that was sweet of him, and I can only justify that because of my childhood and bringing up, the way I was brought up. I just tried to not only listen, but my system took it so naturally. Those days in Paris and touring, that was the period where I heard Jascha Heifetz, Young, I heard Fritz Kreisler, name it, Toscanini conducting, Shaliapin singing, and all the greatest classical musicians. I saw the greatest dancers. I miss Pavlova, but any other ballet dancers, Spanish flamenco dancers or modern dancers. Then came the jazz, which I loved, and of course I heard them all in the vaudeville shows. In those days, they all played, Scatchmo, Duke Ellington, and name them, all the great ones. So, I was assimilating all what I heard, and everything became, nothing was unfamiliar. So that was the big thing in me. And then I was hearing all the classical music of the wonderful musicians that my brother had in his troupe. And then came Baba for 1 year. So already, all this enriched me, my mind, my soul, everything. And I was familiar with all sorts of music, folk music, classical music of any part of the world. Balinese, Japanese, Chinese, Japanese, name it. So all of this had something to do. And then when I was in All India Radio for those years as a composer and director of music, we had a small chamber orchestra. That was the first time where I tried to have an Indian chamber of orchestra, though the only two things I had, which was three things, not Indian actually, which was violin, a cello, and a clarinet. And the rest of the instruments were all Indian, south, north, every. And we had to do a 5-minute piece every week, and some special occasion, half-an-hour piece or 20 minutes piece. And that's where for almost 5 years I had this opportunity of trying out Indian music, short pieces based on strictly classical or little contemporary classical or folk or thematic, some storytelling, opera type things, all in Hindi. So that gave me enough with all that I had in my heart and my mind. And I had also worked with a lot of doing ballet music. Like I did the first Discovery of India written by Pandit Nehru as a ballet, 1.5 hour with intermission. And I did 3-4 different ballets. So all that, gave me a lot of experience, and my background experience of my brother, from whom I learned how much to give. He used to say, give, if one is very hungry, give, we call chapati, that is roti, bread. Said, give him 2. If he can eat 5 or 6, give him 2 pieces and don't give him any more. Let him be a little hungry. So that was the basic of my training, not to bore people. So whether in my composition or in my recitals. So in India, most people have, habit of eating so much of rice, and they want so many things, and which is all right because they are used to it. But you cannot serve a Westerner or a new person who doesn't eat that food that much. It's a very natural thing. So I tried to, adjust my performance without spoiling the character, not mixing raga, not fusion or anything, but within our framework to have enough of slow piece, medium, very fast, something very spiritual, something very romantic, something very folkish. So I completely tried to make this, and then especially after All India Radio service, first time I came to by my own. First time I came when I was 10, but that's not to be counted, but it fed me all the experience, I started performing as usual, a total performance of 2 hours with an intermission, which was unheard of in India, because any classical musician, they have always to prove by singing a rag, one single raga, maybe for an hour and a half or an hour at least. Then people feel satisfied. Oh, wonderful. That was the tradition. And I was criticized like anything by Indians, that he is not giving pure music, by making it short and just proportionate of every little thing. They condemned me, my own people in my own country. But that was for, say, about 3-4 years it went. Then gradually that died out. But unless I had done that, many people before me have performed out, and they were never recognized. But I went to remote places like New Zealand, Dunedin, near the South Poles, or Helsinki and all this, any remote place, Soviet Russia, Japan, and by God's grace, because I knew already what could be very boring, because I always heard from people in the period when I was with my brother saying that Indian music is very boring. You don't know when they start or when they finish, because tuning takes so long time, which I said in Bangladesh concert, you remember? They applaud after our tuning. Because they thought that was peace. So I said, if you like the tuning so much, I hope you will like our performance. Well, that was my own people started criticizing me, but because of that, I really made the way, or the first time they started appreciating our music, and gradually other musicians from India got a chance to come. Technically, you see, this was 55, just my last days of All India Radio. I was very friendly with Menuhin. He had come in 1952. I met Menuhin first time in Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in Paris, which was way back when he was 16 and I was 12 in Paris. He was rehearsing in the morning with Hepzibah on the piano, and Georges Enesco, who was his guru also. He was a good friend of my brother, and he used to come to our house and sit, hear the rehearsal and hear our music. He loved it. Andres Segovia was also our neighbor. I used to sit on his lap, and sometimes he would take the guitar and perform with my sitting on his lap. So we were very lucky, you see. So Georges Enesco took us to the rehearsal in the morning in Théâtre des Champs-Élysées, and his sister Hepzibah was on piano, and they were rehearsing. And when I remember he was so cheruby, and he had half pants, and I met him then, but that was all, you see. But many years later, 1952, Pandit Nehru, our Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, he invited Yehudi to come and perform. He gave some special performances in Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Madras. And that was when I met him really properly. Not only met him, but I played for him at a friend's house who was a government officer, and invited him. And he was absolutely floored. He embraced me and we became friends and we were corresponding. He wanted me to go. And this occasion came, the Bloomingdale, I think there's a store in near Bloomingdale and Asia Society combined. They wanted to do India week or something, you know, selling Indian things and Indian music. So immediately he sent me a cable to Delhi to come there. And at that time, unfortunately, I was having some family trouble at my home. So I couldn't go. But I wrote to him, my guru's son, he's the greatest sarod player today. He can go, and I'll send a junior who is learning from me in my group, tabla player, Chaturlal, to come with him, go with him. He didn't know that time who was. So I explained him he's the best. And that's how Ali Akbar came, which was very good because it was such a great success, and they made the first long playing record in which Menuhin did little introduction, and they had a very successful recital in New York, and also a television show and everything. So this was the incident. I came 1 year later by myself, and of course I later had some program with Yehudiman and I composed few pieces. We played together. Much later it was performed in Edinburgh Festival. We made a record which got Grammy Award. So that's how it happened.
I was always fascinated with his playing, and I never got to meet him. I wonder what sort of person was he?
Well, I mean, I can never say enough about him. You know, I have met so many great musicians, almost all of them in my time, and even recently I do meet. But he was so unique as a human being, not just musician. He was so beautiful person, and apart from music, he had a feeling for everything, you know, and he was so well spoken, you know, and writing, everything. God had given him such beautiful soul. I've never come across a musician like him. And he had this love and respect for anything, you know. It's very natural, even for our Indian great musicians or the Western, they have one-track mind. It's very difficult for them to appreciate anything else. I mean, whatever the reason is. But he was something, anything, a folk drummer or a jazz musician or Indian musician, he had that admiration and love, and he could immediately, you know, react, which was so unusual. And we became, I mean, he was like my brother, and he loved my wife Sukanya very dearly. He was, you know, like our family member. Loved him.
I know that you wrote some songs for him. Did you ever write songs together?
No. I mean, I never wrote. I just sat with him, and it was coming out everything. And I was performing and singing it. And I know little of Western music or notation, so I could not properly write. But then few time I played something, he would write it down. That's how I taught him that whole piece, and then we performed. And I did the, you know, some parts I would play, he would play, then together, all that sort of thing.
That's amazing. I love to listen to his music.
You should hear the latest thing I've done. I mean, last year I wrote another violin and sitar, but this time I didn't play myself. Anushka, my daughter, played with Joshua Bell. it's coming out soon. Joshua is bringing out this record with different combination of musicians that he has played with, and one of it, they performed it in the Ravi festival in Switzerland last year. I'm very happy with that, and he's such a fantastic musician, Joshua.
Yeah. Well, I know many aspects of your musical career many people do not know much about, like your arranging, tablet arranging, and
What?
your arranging. Like with, I was noting in my collection that you did arrangements for Buddy Rich.
Yeah.
You've done so much.
I have done so many things. It has not been, recorded, yes, but recordings are gone. Along with Dick Bach, who did, Richard Bach was my friend, World Pacific Records. And we did a lot of things. But I did two large, long playing anthology of Indian music, talking and demonstrating all different compositions and old form of Dhrupad, Dhamar, all this singing as well as playing. That record is not available. Many things are not.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you became friends with the Beatles? How did that come about?
Well, I first met them at a common friend's house who had arranged a dinner in London. This was way back in '65, sometime in summer, I think. And it was just, they had become very famous. It was either end of '65, yeah, very tail end or something. And it was one of them, who was George, who seemed to be, all the time with me. The whole evening he was with me, asking me questions about the relationship with music and religion and yoga and the Vedic things. I was surprised, coming from a rock and roll person, and I was very attracted to him. That's how it started. Then he met me once more, and he said he did want to learn Sitar, and I started the lesson. That time he was living in somewhere else, not the present place, in Esher, outside London. And I was so attracted to him because of his quest, his questions, and especially the spiritual aspect or religious aspect. It was so fantastic. And then he came to India. We spent some time in Kashmir. I gave him his lessons, and it was a wonderful, and I really loved him like my son, or brother, or friend, everything together. He was such a charming person, and his quest was so genuine. I gave him his first book of autobiography of an yogi by Yogananda. That really helped him so much. And then he read books. I gave him books of Vivekananda, and what he really tried to find out, and he was very much deep into, is not the ritualistic religion, but the philosophical and the spiritual of the Vedic culture. And he was very much into it, really. A beautiful soul.
Yeah, and he taught many people about Indian music and bringing that to life.
Yeah, that was the second phase. The first phase, Yehudi Menhuin helped a lot, and I toured. I was playing in Carnegie Hall, Royal Festival Hall, Sydney Opera. But it was a nice group, large group, full houses everywhere. But George's association brought the kids, of course, I was a bit unhappy because all these kids were too much into drugs. And that's something which I was speaking out from the day one. You know, I tried to tell them, don't associate our music with it. And that then came, of course, Monterey Pop Festival, which again, big hate Ashbury, tantra, mantra, you know, sex, all hodgepodge together, yoga, and too much LSD and all that sort of thing. I was always having problem with the, you know, that group, what do you call them? I forgot. San Francisco was the base before the hippies. They were the intellectuals. They were
like beatniks.
Beatniks?
Beatniks. Exactly. And you know, I had met people like Aldous Huxley and all the famous people, and Timothy Leary and all these. But you know, unfortunately, I saw them very much into drugs and things like that. And I was unhappy even then, before. But when I saw the little kids, 14, 15, 16 years, into drugs, and it hurt me very much. And they're associating Indian music, hurt me more. Whenever they made a film or anything, you know, orgy sing, all into drugs, you will hear the sitar twang. That for 2 years I went on speaking and cut myself, my box office myself, because they were naturally hurt. They didn't realize what I was trying to say. But I'm glad to see that that sort of thing came as a, you know, much normal. But that was a difficult period. Back home, I was being criticized that I had become a hippie myself. They thought I was the fifth Beatles, and things like that. But anyway, that period is gone, and I'm happy about it.
Well, I think what came from that, maybe it started before, but I always associated the whole opening of world music and sharing musical cultures. Really
Absolutely,
came from
absolutely, absolutely. That happened. World music was there. And because what I was doing as composer was really not known much, whether it was with the New York Philharmonic or London Symphony Orchestra or documentaries that were made or ballets that I did music for, they were not known. So George had the access to all this music he heard. I gave him records and recordings of some, and he realized it that I'm trying out many things without just copying, you know. If you have noticed that excepting Yehudi Menuhin and Jean-Pierre Rampal, I have not performed with any, or what do you call when you just jam with someone. I've been asked by all the best jazz musicians, pop musicians, but I have not done that because I thought that I can definitely try it out, but I thought, what's the use, because I don't know their music, I have not performed, and I didn't want to make myself a fool by trying to just, so, but I have composed. In my compositions, I have taken inspiration from everywhere, folk of anywhere, rhythmic, drumming, melodic, that I have done.
Very interesting. I wonder if you could take a minute to tell us a little of the background, the history of the sitar.
Background of sitar is the veena. In veena also, if you study, you will see that we have two principal. Any stringed instrument was called the veena. with additional name in front, like Vichitra Vina, Saraswati Vina, Rudra Vina, Shatatantri Vina. I mean, it went on, all these string instruments. But principally, there were only two types of Vinas. In the south, what you see in the photo sometimes with Saraswati, the Devi, the goddess of learning and music, one small gourd here and a gourd here, and it's mostly almost lying, not upright, and they play. It's a beautiful looking instrument. And the north, there were also a number of different Vinas, but the main Vina was sometimes called Saraswati Vina or Rudra Vina, but it had just a bamboo fingerboard and huge, two big gourds. And they had to take it, one gourd was here and the other was here. Very difficult to handle, and even to sit with the Vina it took long time to. And that was the old style of music, which was in contemporary to what is known as the Dhrupad, Dhamar, all this style of singing. Because singing and playing instrument were very much attached together in the old days. And that was for years. Only it is 19th century early, someone says 18th century late, but I think actually it was in the 19th century that sitar took shape. After many little difference, people were trying to make it more easier to play. Before it had a small gourd in between also, three, one big one, middle one, and a medium size. Then after a lot of changes through many years, the present day of sitar, which was more developed in Calcutta than anywhere else. And that is the sitar that I started playing, And it is a very versatile instrument because you can play on the frets and you can pull the string, stretch it, and get the effect of vocal music, glissandes and things like that. And became most popular string instrument really. Sarod also became popular in the hands of Baba Aladdin and some other great sarod players, and especially afterwards Ali Akbar Khan. And they are wonderful sarod players today also. But sitar always was among the North Indian Hindustani style of music the most popular instrument. And especially because you can pull almost till the fifth, da, da, things like that, So it gives the vocal effect. So that became very popular.
Did you use traditional tuning always, or did that vary?
There has never been a traditional tuning really, because the veena, or the bean as it was popularly called, with two tumbas and the bamboo, the traditional, they tuned it lower, almost A as the tonic, and till about maybe B flat. And they could play 3 octaves in that. But sitar, because they were different size, one very large sitar was known as surbahar. That was only meant for alap, jod, jhala, and not with tabla gat, not the khyal contemporary classical style. Only Dhrupad Dhamar style and without tabla. Sometime with pakhawaj maybe, like in the Dhrupad style. But that was much larger. That was tuned to almost, I would say tonic would have been like sol, do re mi fa sol, that note. G as the tonic. But sitar then came much higher tuning because it was smaller and sharper. So anything ranging from B flat to D, depending on the size and preference of the musician, as the tonic.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. One other thing I wish to cover with you, and as you know, one of our missions is to encourage people to become music makers and make this a part of your life. And I wonder if you could help us with your understanding of the benefits of music. I remember reading when you were talking about the spirit of music and things like this, and I wonder if you could share some of those thoughts.
Well, I mean, my personal thing is that music plays so major part in my life. Even sometimes I can't sleep properly because it is all the time I'm doing something or finding some mathematical problem in counting. We have so much rich rhythmic world in our music. Nowhere in the world it is, rhythmic cycles, not only 4 or 6, but 5, 7s, 13s, 15s cycle, and to think of composition, think of triads in it, which is very popular, anything 3 times, and with 1, starting from 1. So these things, keeps me awake whole night sometimes, and even when I'm eating or talking, something is going on in my head. So it's very easy to say music is my life, but what does that mean? I mean, it depends upon different people approach to what they call life, Then, of course, there's the tremendous part, what we say spiritual side. Mind you, not religious, but spiritual. Something which can't be explained I cannot explain it by word. When I perform myself or practice alone, or sometimes even when I perform for public, it happens. Maybe for a few minutes, maybe for a longer period, where I can become one with my instrument, my whole thought process. It gives me goosebumps, brings tears to my eyes. I feel something so special. I don't know whether to call it God or what, but then I feel many a times reaction in the public, people having tears in their eyes. Some are like this with their eyes closed. That's what I call the greatest music, the greatest moment of music, when I become music myself. There's no difference between my sitar or me. Sitar becomes alive. And these are things, very hard to explain. It sounds very high-worded things, but these miraculous things have happened to me and is happening all the time with me. So now I feel the whole world, which is not bad, I'm not criticizing, but the overemphasize in music, it seems, in virtuosity, speed, A, and B, banging, too much rhythm, too much A, and that's what excites people. People get up and start dancing, and which is fine. But I think music also has something deeper side. I'll tell you one story. Again, Baba. This was way back in 59 or something. I was at his home in Mayhar, and I went to visit him for a few days. And there were few guests who had come in the evening. There were some scientists, some professors, some very academic people, from different cities nearby, and they all respected him. And one of them asked him, Baba, what do you think of this present trend. Everybody is running, every speed and virtuosity and bang, bang, and the mic loud and especially speed, and people are getting crazy. So he says, well, let me ask you a question. He said to this professor, how high has man gone? So in just before that, the Sputnik, the Russian thing had gone. So he says, oh Baba, now it has gone so many thousands of miles, and very soon it will reach the moon. And he was saying, oh my God, can you imagine? Then he asked, can you tell me how much deep has man gone? So he said something about in the ocean, I don't remember, maybe 4 miles or something. He said, that's all? So that man was thinking, what the hell is he talking about? I mean, I asked him a question about music. Then he said himself, you see how much easier it is to go up, more practice, more practice. Every year Olympic, your record is broken by someone, getting faster. But why not deeper, deeper? So in music also same thing. You can fly and do all those acrobatics and people get crazy. But just one note and just a little bit and bring tears to anyone's eyes or give that deep feeling is very, very much more difficult. So I think it was one of the best examples. Thank you.
That's a very good story. I thank you for sharing that with me. I thank you for sharing that with me. It's very interesting.
It's very interesting. He was a fantastic person. I really want the world to know more about him. So
thank you
for
your time. We really appreciate it.